Welcome into an Inside Carolina Postgame podcast. I'm Tommy Ashley. We are sponsored by Johnny T-Shirt and Congruity. That is Rob Harrington, Louisville 83, Carolina 70 from the Yum Center in Louisville, Kentucky. Rob, I want to start backwards, and I'm gonna let you run with this because I'm gassed, man. Between all the craziness going on in the world today, and then the irrelevancy of sports in the grand scheme, and then having to watch Ohio State do what they did to Oregon, which I'm not an Ohio State fan, and then to watch specifically what I'm about to ask you about. Carolina gets within 69-70, trails by one. Drake Powell picks up his fifth foul. He goes out. Elliot Cadeau comes back in after being on the bench for quite some time, and Louisville outscores Carolina 13-1 to close the game. Rob, your overall thoughts and what in the world is going on with this Carolina basketball team in crunch time?
You know, the thing is, they've had really good second halves for the most part, as we know, because the story has been all these first half deficits that they have managed to overcome with very forceful and thoughtful play in the second half of games. What we got here was an absolute collapse. I mean, it was almost comedic how the most brain dead plays, the worst mistakes, fouling 3-point shooters, miscommunications on rebounds, miscommunications on defense generally, guys not getting into the play on offensive possessions where they're just sort of stalling out and they're waiting for someone to start the move. Those types of things happen in sequence. And the result of that is what you saw. I mean, Louisville did everything they could to let the Tar Heels back in the game with the free throw shooting and some poor possessions of their own and some good Carolina defense later in the game. But all in all, I mean, just too many mental mistakes. You can get into the physical stuff too. I'm sure we'll talk about that. I am hesitant to blame it on dependent on a player. Likewise, the better stretch they had, I wouldn't say that was because of any one player, although Ian Jackson had a great second half. But more so, just the entire team did everything wrong. It seemed like, from a mental point of view, they just weren't locked in.
Yeah, you watch, the picture I had up there at front is Van Allen Lubin, who I thought has played pretty well at times this year. But you see him and Jalen Washington watch a guy get an offensive rebound. You see just Washington moving screen after moving screen. You see Van Allen Lubin throwing the ball to nobody. I mean, we often talk, Rob, on the football side of this, and I understand the roster. It's January. There's got to be some way to figure out what's going on and work around your roster limitations. But quite frankly, what we've seen from day one are the same issues we're seeing today. So I say this, what we say on the football side, and you follow the football as much, you get what you allow. And guys are allowed to continue to make the most ridiculous plays, the lack of effort plays, Rob. Let's talk about that for a minute because, I watch Louisville, the little left-handed shooter. He didn't have a ton of talent. He can play, and he hustles. What are you seeing from this team in that regard? We can talk about talent, roster construction, all we want. But the most concerning thing to me that should be the issue for Carolina fans is not that. It should be that this team does not play basketball. It does not play team basketball. Ian Jackson's great. Ian Jackson's blossoming and is amazing. But the rest of the guys, Rob, what do you think? Am I being too tough on it?
I think they're disjointed. That's how I would put it. I don't think they've quit. I rarely will go there. I don't think they've quit, but I do think they lack belief. We've talked about that before. They're very disorganized, especially on defense. They came out in the second half and were totally out schemed. They were giving up one or two pass possessions for layups and dunks, uncontested lobs. They are just disorganized and not connected, and that's related to the point that you're making about the team isn't, as Roy Williams would say, losing itself in the competition, and we've talked about that before too. They're not playing for each other. I think you could argue, and maybe over the course of the season we'll get into this a little bit more, that because the offense is set up to be stagnant and it's a lot of my turn, your turn, that doesn't lend itself to a team that's playing connected on the defensive end either. Because a lot of the people are saying now, well, I don't like this modern offense, but there are a lot of modern offenses that have this structure where their teams are still connected and they get a lot of player movement, they get a lot of ball movement. I don't necessarily think Carolina's guys are selfish, but I do think they are tunnel vision in a way that suggests that they're playing their game. It's like baseball, like they're on an island or something. It's like my game, and
Mhm.
that has to stop if they're going to beat even a mediocre team like Louisville. If you're going to beat someone on the road in your league, you have to be more connected than that. So the effort here, however we attribute the causes, the symptoms are very obvious, and if they don't turn that around, it's going to be. I mean, they have no chance of making the tournament if they don't fix that, ASAP.
What do you see? And you know the game a lot better than most people, including when you're talking to, plus a ton of the people watching this. What can North Carolina do? What can Hubert Davis and his staff do? What I see is, um, like I mentioned earlier, you have the physical limitations that you have to work around, and I just don't. I'm looking at a pro offense that is run with, um, not even elite D1 basketball players. There's a couple of them, but does not appear to me that whatever's been going on since day one of the season is working. Your thoughts on what they could do to change it if it's not an effort issue, if it's disconnectedness. Well, I don't know how you fix that now. I mean, that's an off-season thing.
It is late.
Yeah. So where can this team go to find some sort of success that is not just individually based on one guy to saying my turn and making a play?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think for me it starts on the defensive end because they've been so poor for long stretches of games. I mean, I'm more sympathetic to R.J. Davis having a bad shooting year and not blaming that on Hubert Davis. That wasn't
Mhm.
foreseeable. No one would have expected him to miss wide open threes like he missed tonight. Defensively, though, you knew they were going to be challenged and you knew they were going to have problems. And it just looks to me like they're slow to react, and they still haven't figured out A, the center rotation, B, how they would like to defend screen and rolls, C, what's plan B when a team plays bully ball with Cadeau and Davis like Louisville did tonight?
Absolutely.
How they've got to do something different than just allowing them to get into the opponent to get into their stuff so easily. And then on offense, of course, that's easier to see. I actually thought the first half they did a better job of finding the roll man on high screens. You saw Powell and Jackson both cut to the rim some, off the
Mhm.
ball, which I thought that was good. So they had some better possessions in the first half. I thought the second half devolved more into the usual, YOLO type offense where everyone just stands flat-footed and watches someone dribble, and it works some of the time, but I don't think it's sustainable. I think they're much better off having more player movement because this team doesn't have, they haven't had all season a really reliable number one scorer. I mean, Jackson is stepping into that role now, maybe, but he's not so much a playmaker. So I do think they have the talent to improve there, but to build off things they did in the first half. Also, like the first half of the Florida game, it's weird. You had two losses, but I thought even though they didn't necessarily shoot well, I saw some things that I liked. And then in both of those games in the second half, you got more of the standing, flat-footed stuff. And in the long run, I don't think that's going to work.
Yeah, when you look at Carolina, and this is just, I mean, it's the stats are what the stats are. Louisville 13-1 run over the last 3 minutes or 2:59. Carolina had 4 turnovers in the last 5:09, no field goals in the last 5:09 after it being 70-69. Not a recipe for success. And like I mentioned, once Drake Powell of all people, once he came out of the game, and this is why people sort of misunderstand his importance to this team, is once he came out, it just completely fell apart. And yes, Seth Trimble was out. Yes, the officiating's atrocious. Look, this is the ACC, and I'm not going to say it's TV, Teddy, or whatever, but you've got how many fouls called? 21,
It ruined the flow of the game.
50
Yeah.
fouls called in this game, including 2 technicals late at the end of the game. I mean, people want to talk about ACC basketball and how it sucks. There it is, right there. It is not all on the teams themselves. It's on 50 fouls in a 40-minute game. I mean, that's just obscene. But that is no excuse. That is no excuse for not boxing out. That is no excuse for not playing your man, figuring it out on defense. That's no excuse for fouling a three-point shooter. To your point, and then this is something else that's got to be addressed, Rob. It is you mentioned the bully ball, and I think it's a very relevant thing. It is something I mentioned way back sitting on the steps of the Smith Center when I made the comment that Cadeau doesn't need to start for this team because they've got to have some size on that end and at the guard position. Hepburn shot 20 free throws, made 16 of them. That is obscene for a point guard or for a lead guard. So how does Carolina deal with that? I mean, Seth Trimble helps, but
right.
there's really nothing you can. If we can criticize Hubert all we want, there's nothing you can do about that. I don't think, Rob, unless you're saying something that I am not.
No, they're going to be compromised there all season. I mentioned it earlier. They have to have, when that happens, if you have a player who can basically Jalen Brunson you, then you have to figure out some sort of help scheme and give up something else. And they started to do a little bit more of that late. They actually got a couple of steals later in the second half where they doubled on Hepburn, but it was too long to get there after Louisville had been allowed to get into rhythm for a long time. And in that run late in the game that you mentioned, I mean, it was. I never like to be like, oh well, we beat ourselves. The opponent didn't beat us, but it actually felt like that in some respects because Carolina was was handing them, making mistakes and handing them opportunities, missing rebounds, wide open threes. In Louisville, to their credit, took advantage, but it took them a long time to take advantage after they missed all those free throws and make mistakes of their own. So it was another one of those games where it was right there for the Heels to win it. As poorly as they had played, I was like, okay, it's fixed it. It's an ugly one. They get an ugly win, but they're 2-0. They get a road win, and then the whole thing was just catastrophic. It didn't even come down to a buzzer beater or something. It was just all of a sudden they were no longer competing for 3 or 4 minutes, and it was surprising to see because, like we said at the top, the one thing they had been doing, even though they have had other meltdowns, they at least played with a lot of intensity in the second half, and it's like they just went vapid all of a sudden in that final stanza. It was surprising.
Yeah, I want to talk about a couple positives after this, and I don't know what show you're watching, Ben Williams, and I don't like calling out posters because I appreciate everybody that comes in here. But Ben Williams says, why does IC continue to give Hubert a pass? I'm not going to blame him for things that you can't help. You can't help that you've got a 5'11" point guard or 5'11" shooting guard that gets bullied. But you can help all the other things that we talked about before that, and that's on Hubert and the coaching staff. Johnny T-shirt, JohnnyT-shirt.com. One thing you can't do is talk about them because they bring it every day. They bring great customer service, great swag, and great gear, all the stuff you need. Go to JohnnyT-shirt.com. They'll deliver it to your house. Go to Johnny T-shirt on Franklin Street if you're in town. It's a great time to see them and support local businesses. That's all about what we do here. There's 700 people here. If 700 people in this live chat ordered something from Johnny T-shirt and all the local businesses in Chapel Hill, Franklin Street looked like it did back in the day. We'd support all those local businesses, Rob. You know, like I know, Franklin Street is a far cry from what it used to be, and that's because we need to support local businesses and get it back going there. They're great online or in person. Also, Matt at congruityhr.com for your small to mid-sized business assessment. They can build your business. They can build a better plan for your business. If you have some limitations, Matt at congruityhr.com, they'll give you plans to get past those limitations and go to the next level and win a few of the discussions that you might have on how to get your small business going. Rob, we're 15 minutes in or so. Let's talk about Ian Jackson just a little bit. It is fascinating to watch his growth. And quite frankly, he shot the ball 15 times, led the team in shots, led the team in points. RJ had 2 more minutes than him. We talked about whose team it was all year. I think it's becoming Ian Jackson's team, right?
I think yes. Potentially. I'm part of me wants them to move away from even thinking about it that way because I think that lends itself to this thing where one guy is going to control the offense. So what I think they can do though, that would work very well with Jackson, even within the confines of what they do, which is more stagnant than maybe we might like, is to, instead of, you say when Davis gets that first high ball screen or Cadeau, that instead of dribbling, if it doesn't work immediately, the ball goes to Jackson more often, because when he's there on the wing, the teams are focusing on Davis, especially with the top two defenders. Now you have Jackson on the wing by himself, and you're seeing him make a lot of great plays from that position, because on the catch he's ready. He's very aggressive. He's making his 3-point shot. He's handling the ball much better than I thought he would. I thought that was a weakness for him coming to college. He's handling the ball well enough, at least. He gets to the rim. He gets fouled. He gets a little finesse sometimes, but he's getting better and better all the time, and he's getting respect. He's getting respect from defenses. He's getting respect from officials, because he looks like someone who can make a play, and he does. And officials are human. If they see a guy who looks like, oh yeah, he looks like someone who would go in there, and he has the agility and the body control to make plays off the move. I think he will continue, I hope, to get the lion's share of the shots, and it doesn't have to be a situation like where they line him up at the top of the key and he gets that high ball screen. I guess that's the point that I'm making, is that it works perfectly well for them to play just a little bit slower. I wish they would play slower in general. Play a little bit slower, and then see what the initial action's doing. If Davis gets a great shot or Cadeau hits a roller like he did a few times tonight, great. If not, then it goes to Jackson, and then he's the one who makes the play.
Indeed, yeah. He's put up an impressive stretch for a freshman. 23 tonight, 7 for 11 from the line, 4 rebounds, 1 assist, and a couple of turnovers, but certainly a bright spot when you look at it, and there's not many bright spots in there. Drake Powell, I thought, played well until he was no longer in there. And like I said earlier to start this, I think when he fouled out, that's when it totally went off the rails. Rob, Carolina's got a trip to Notre Dame. Notre Dame's not very good, but Notre Dame on the road is going to be a challenge.
Any road game.
Yeah, and it's ACC road games. And if this team takes anything for granted, then I'm not sure what we're doing, because there's no reason to even talk about it. We'd be way past saying anything. But what does Carolina have to do to sort of not only own not in the win-loss record, but getting to the win-loss record, improving their resume to try to figure out a way to eke into the NCAA tournament? Right now it looks bleak after you lose to Louisville, which would have been a quad 1 win. It looks bleaker. Pull the Sherelle roll, right? The Sherelle's moment of clarity and understanding that gives people a little bit of peace of mind going forward, if you can.
Yeah, I mean, we'll see. Certainly it's early enough in the season. There are a lot of games to play that would do wonders for their resume. They're probably 2 wins in a row away from us having a different tone of a podcast. It's not that we would say they're a great team, but if they win 2 in a row, then it's like, okay, now they start to feel good about themselves instead of the staccato thing they've been doing with a win here and a win there. Can they put together 2 in a row? Of course, they have to get one first. The next 2 are winnable. They need them both. I mean, you take one at a time, but they need them both, because if they slump to something like a 1-3 start, then it's hard to see them digging out of it, especially because the team already looks to me like they're teetering in terms of confidence. And so if it becomes that situation like it was in 2023, when I think they lost 5 out of 6 and they were basically buried after that, that can happen early in the season too. And they need to make sure that they stay above water, win the next 2, and then we start having a more positive discussion.
Yeah, and I'm going to address something else in the chat, and I think it's a fair question, but I want to get your take here because, again, you've watched a ton of basketball. I said earlier, you get what you allow. We've seen the bigs that play for Carolina put in some poor efforts, and for whatever reason, they're still out there, and they're still rolling back out there, and James Brown is not. And it's very limited, and James Brown certainly is very limited, but why – at this point, Rob, why not give somebody like Brown a chance? Everybody says free James Brown. Why not? I mean, what do you see that maybe others are not seeing? Because I'm not seeing any reason not to give this young man an opportunity.
I'm more deferential on that stuff because I'm not in practice, so right. I don't know how it looks in practice. The other thing is he's at the worst position because he's buried at a position where there is no clarity. There's just bodies. I think they already play too many guys at center, and it drives. This is the exact thing that I wanted to avoid last summer, and why I didn't want them to take anyone else after Lubin, so not Claude, because what you don't want is lack of role clarity, and you see it show up from game to game. You don't know what you're going to get from any of these guys. They don't know how much they're going to play. Lubin, I think, got benched in the last game or two for a second half. That type of stuff, it makes it difficult for players to develop the whole team to develop continuity, one thing, but also for that player to feel like I know what my role is and how I should contribute. And I think Brown playing minutes would just exacerbate that issue, even though I agree that he actually has looked better in the limited playing time he's received than I thought he would. He seems to be a livelier body with better reflexes than some of the other guys. I think he has pretty good reflexes, and I'm a big reflex adherent. I think especially for big guys, reflexes are critically important and very often overlooked. So I would like to see him get in there from that point of view. But on the other hand, I'm not too critical about Hubert over it because he's already got a mess. I mean, an absolute mess at center. And they still, to the extent that I'm critical, it's like, hey, figure out, go with someone and try to work a rotation from game to game and get some consistency, as difficult as that is, because I've been a Lubin person. And then he comes in tonight and has one of the most unfortunate stretches I've seen from a player in some time. I mean, just bottomed out for a couple of minutes. And so I don't know what you do about that. Can you put him back in the starting lineup and give him 25 minutes? I don't think so. But I'm with you on Brown. I hope they can keep him. I think it's going to be real difficult to bring back both Washington and Lubin next year if they would like to keep him, assuming that they try to get a starter, because Brown probably wouldn't come back to be number 4. Wouldn't blame him.
Yeah, I mean, you said it well, and I'm going to end it that way. It is a mess, and Hubert Davis did not inherit the mess. This is his roster 100%, and for whatever reason, the bodies that are out there are the bodies that he has to roll with, and it's up to them to figure out a way to get this back on track. I do like your point about roles, and I think substitution patterns are all over the place. I mean, it's easy to be critical when they're not winning. And like Roy Williams said, when the ball doesn't goes in the basket, but sometimes you got to find a way to win anyway. And just Carolina hadn't had that opportunity or have not created their own opportunity. Rob, anything left before you want us to get out of here and get back to the message boards, I guess? I don't know. They're a dangerous place right now, but shout out to the 800 people that have been in this chat. But Rob, I'll let you close us out.
No, and when we started this year, we said that we would have fun on the show whether the team did well or not. And I was under my breath thinking when I said that, well, hopefully that won't be an issue because this should be a fun, good team. Now here we are, focusing on having to deal with a team that's swimming upstream much more than probably anyone thought would happen. We'll stick with them, and I will say this is how I'll leave it. I'm gonna look at them where they are in the range of possibilities. Right now, that's maybe 50% making the tournament, 50% not making the tournament. Maybe that's generous. So the brackets have moved from early in the year, where I would have said, okay, top 15, the number 8 to number 15, that's moved over. I think toward the end of the season, you and I will talk about major program issues. So I'm deferring on the people will want us to be more critical of Hubert. I think we're being critical of Hubert in some ways by implication by saying the team is disorganized. But in terms of the future of the program, that's something that we can take up a little later. But for right now, I'm going to stay focused on the current season, whether they'll make the tournament, win 2 in a row, and then let's have some fun on a more positive note with 800 people in here.
We shall see. It's always a pleasure to talk to you. I mean, one thing I get out of this is getting to talk to you and getting to talk to Rel and Dewey and all the rest. I mean, look, they're more fun when Carolina wins, but it does not stop the job that Inside Carolina has to do. And we have to do it in a fair and reasonable way and not just completely come out and flamethrow, even though that would be easy to do with the way this team is played and all. But Carolina loses to Louisville in a game that they were right there with a couple minutes left and just completely, we'll call it melted down. There's other terms for it that probably fit more, but completely melted down in a way that unfortunately is not the first time we've seen it. That's what I want to see going forward, is not seeing the same MO and the same deal week in or day in and game out. I mean, you got to do something different. It's up to Hubert and the rest of that coaching staff to figure it out. That's Rob Harrington. I'm Tommy Ashley. Shout out to Johnny T-shirt and Congruity. Shout out to the 700 and 800 plus people that have been here. Everybody stay safe and Happy New Year. Happy New Year, Rob.
Happy New Year.